Welcome back and thank you for staying with KTN Prime. Now, before we dive into a conversation, let's just take a look at what's in store for you in tomorrow's edition of Kenya's bold newspaper, The Standard. The headline is State Impunity, Abuse of Power. Rose Njeri, a software developer and civic activist, thought she was using her skills to educate Kenyans on the finance bill and have them register their dissent. In return, a law that targets hackers is being used to prosecute her. Her arrest and arraignment has lawyers and critics up in arms, accusing the state of weaponizing cybercrime laws to silence digital activism and public participation. All eyes are on the judiciary on June 20th to see where hacking starts and dissent stops. We'll be having an in-depth analysis of what exactly transpired and the charge sheet. But also, we'll be talking about matters education. Nancy Macharia exits TSC after 10 years at the helm. What exactly was she able to achieve? And what does it mean now that she's leaving? Will there be a vacuum? And what does that mean for the Teacher Service Commission? All that will be canvassing in tomorrow's edition of The Standard. And of course, sports. And we'll be talking about party launch problems for Gachagua, as it was supposed to be held today, but it did not happen for various reasons. All this will be canvassed, so be sure to grab a copy of The Standard and get informed. Well, let's get into our conversation tonight. And we are joined by Ishmael Nyaribo, an advocate of the High Court. Good evening. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Ashley.
And also Stella Agara, governance and security analyst, is joining us virtually. We'll be having her shortly. But even as we wait for Stella, Ishmael, I mean, it has been quite a long weekend. And I say this in terms of revelations. Everyone is aware of what activist Boniface Mwangi and Agatha Tuhaire yesterday narrated their ordeal. I don't know if I should call it painful ordeal, that has raised so many questions. I mean, I can say they went through hell in Tanzania, but it doesn't seem like the government has a lot to say. Does the mom from government officials concern you as a Kenyan?
Well, you know, Ashley, first and foremost, you know, we have to look at the hero and the heroines of our times and what they have done, what they've suffered, what they've gone through, so that me and you are happier, and me and you are safe. And I think besides all this, the torture, the pain, besides the politics around it, and memes, and some people thinking it's a field day for them, we must look at this as the hero in Boniface Mwangi and Agatha, the pain. They've done. Why should somebody else suffer my pain? I mean, he is suffering. They are being tortured in Tanzania, because the assumption is Kenyans are just coming here to do some mischief. I'm a Kenyan. I did not go down there, and yet somebody has suffered for me. And therefore, I think I really must look at how big the two are and what they did for both the country and democracy in the whole world.
Okay.
But I am not surprised that the government in Kenya is quiet. I am not, because at the prayer breakfast, they actually apologized to Tanzania. If we have offended you, we are sorry. They apologized to our neighbor. Actually, that is the height of impunity and arrogance from the government of Kenya to actually apologize for nothing. I mean, what happened that deserved Kenyan president to apologize to Tanzania? The people of Kenya are not apologetic for visiting our neighbor. There is a whole charter of the East African community that allows us to visit our neighbors. There is not one indication that Martha Karua and the rest of the people went to Tanzania to cause any harm. They did not go to do nothing but to attend a court case. And many others were allowed to attend. So I'm not worried, nor I'm worried. Sorry, I'm concerned and worried. But it's not new that the Kenyan government can behave like that. There is an unspoken word, unspoken language between the three heads of states in East Africa. Probably extending to other regions, but these three obviously do not want any dissent or anybody opposing them. What we see in Kenya, the strong opposition from the Gen Z, from the public, is because of the constitution that people made in 2010, where many people already died. I don't think we've seen that in Uganda or in Tanzania. Kenyans died to give themselves a constitution that they cannot accept to be silenced. I think that is why we have this robust kind of democracy. But in terms of leaders who are in office, they are the same, like Suluhu, like President Yoweri Museveni, like our own President William Ruto. They are the same, by the way. They do not wish to be opposed.
Okay.
In the very least, they do not wish to be opposed.
All right, let's now just turn our focus to Stella. Stella, good evening. I hope you can hear me clearly. I mean, from what Nyaribo has said and from what we heard from Boniface Mwangi, the activist, I mean, there were claims that the captors knew details about him that only a Kenyan would know. Equally says that the Kenyan government knew what was happening because Boniface Mwangi claims that his lawyer received a phone call from the Kenyan ambassador to TZ. Critics are terming the events as a coordinated effort by East African governments to suppress fundamental rights. As you've equally heard from Nyaribo, he shares the same sentiments. Where do you sit when it comes to this issue? Stella, I don't know if you can hear me, but of course, the entire issue about Boniface Mwangi, critics are terming the events as coordinated efforts by East African governments to suppress fundamental human rights. What's your take on it? We seem to be having a challenge getting Stella, but I'm sure she has a lot to say when it comes to this matter. Let's just try and fix the audio and then come back to her. But Nyaribo, coming to you, I mean, you talked about the fact that we saw President William Ruto apologize, not just to Tanzania, but equally to Uganda. Let's not forget that last year, Dr. Kiza Besigye was abducted from Nairobi. I mean, who should he be apologizing to, really? Is it?
I think that, I mean, we should have an apology from Tanzania. Why they actually literally abducted a citizen of a friendly nation, East African community for that matter, an East African nation, why they had to take him from the hotel, go to the police station, and then abduct him from the police station, and then give him to criminals. But, you know, Ashley, this is not only unique for Tanzania. This happens here too. If you remember the debates we had about abductions, that is just a replica. These youth who came from the dark dungeons where they were kept, they explained to us the same story. They said we were taken here blindfolded, and then after that, we were taken to another room again, blindfolded, and we were being asked this or that question, whether, you know, what's your password of your phone. And, you know, and I think if you're interested to know about the cyber crime, I'm sure you have this coming up. This phone, the way it has been made, you know, it's sort of like a lifeline. It's people's lives. So when the security agencies want your phone, I mean, you know, they can still access your phone and get all the data they want, but it is not fully that they cannot access your phone fully. So they've got to take it physically and then take it to the cybercrime unit and then try to harvest all the information they need. That again is illegal per the law because you are breaching the rules of privacy, number one. Number two, you are misusing my phone. You are misusing my gadget. And that is against the Cybercrime Act, is against the Data Protection Act, is against the Constitution of our country. So I think Tanzania, in fact, I don't blame Tanzania because that is I don't know their rules, how they operate, but the level at which we have put Kenya, we do not expect this to happen. And therefore, we expect the president to really send a letter to Tanzania for Tanzania to explain whether it is true these people were tortured, whether they were returned to the country correctly. Because what reason can you give for banning Martha Karua from stepping foot in Tanzania? What reasons can you give for banning Boniface Mwangi from traveling to Tanzania? That's again, there are several charters since 1948 to date, until 1984, for example, the African Charter of Human Rights, then there are United Nations, documents that allow citizens to move freely, and especially not to be subjected to torture.
Yeah.
In fact, torture is the most inhumane activity you can do to a human being, because, I mean, if you look at what the activists are saying, Agatha and Boniface, I mean, those kind of explanations.
Even sexual abuse.
Yeah. Who can withstand that? I mean, who can withstand that? Nobody can withstand that. It does not matter. It's a young person, it's an old person. That kind of inhumane torture of a citizen or a human being cannot be condoned. And I'm not worried about Kenya, Ashley. I am waiting keenly to see what the European countries will say, what United States says, what, Asian countries will say about this particular thing, because injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. So it could happen to anybody in any part of the world.
Okay. Karen, do we have Stella now? Okay, let's now get to Stella. Stella, I hope you can hear me clearly this time. I mean, we're looking at it from an East African perspective. Critics are saying it seems coordinated. Where do you stand when it comes to this particular issue?
Ashley, first of all, thank you very much for having me. I must express extreme disappointment in how this entire matter has been handled, both by the government of Kenya, the government of Tanzania, and the East Africa community itself. The silence is deafening, and definitely by the AU. And there's a reason why I'm mentioning all those agencies. My colleague was speaking for the part where I could hear him speaking, and he mentioned a few instruments that are under the AU that actually govern the situation that Boni and Agatha found themselves in. Actually, if you read the East African Treaty and the additional protocols that have been passed to be able to support the regional integration process, you discover that mechanisms have been created for citizens to travel freely. There is the treaty establishing a customs union, and there's the common market protocol that then allow one, people to move freely, and number two, people to do business freely in the region. Now, the one that allows people to move freely normally guarantees, first of all, provides for a single customs territory. A single customs territory actually means that everybody who's moving in the region, once you cross one border, as soon as it is registered and that you've moved through one border, every other border in the region then gets to know that you have moved through that border. If you're a criminal, it is picked up with all the borders, not just in Tanzania, but in every other part of the East Africa community. Apart from the single customs territory, there's also the East African passport. I don't know whether you are aware, Ashley, that the passports that we hold now are East African passports and not Kenyan passports or Tanzanian passports, etc. As a matter of fact, we're being encouraged to move towards having digital East African passports so that the data can be processed in an easier way. When these people moved through the border, all of them were processed through the border. If there's an offense that was found on Boni's account or on Agatha's account, the government of Tanzania had either a responsibility of prosecuting them on their soil or deporting them back to their country if they didn't have the paperwork that is required. The only grounds against which anybody should be barred from entering another country once they are holders of an East Africa passport is health, security, and if they do not have the paperwork that is required, policy issues. I do not remember any of them suffering from a disease that is being controlled in the region. I don't remember any policy issues being mentioned anywhere concerning this matter. Neither do I see any security threat that these two people were going to cause, especially because their reasons for travel were known. They had already been admitted in the country. Every level of assessment had assumed that they're legitimate. For them to come out of a country having been tortured, and our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is responsible for taking care of citizens outside this country, does not even look like it's interested in following up to ensure that action is taken to defend them, is a huge problem, Ashley. It's a huge problem, not because of Boni and Agatha in the case of Uganda. It is a huge problem in the case of other people who are traveling outside the world. The question everybody who's outside this country should be asking themselves is, are they in safe hands, and pun intended, with that gentleman who's running the State Department for Foreign Affairs, Musalia Mudavadi? Are they in safe hands with the Ambassador Singoei, who's second in command as far as handling citizens outside the country? A person who is born in Kenya or gain citizenship through the other mechanisms available to become a citizen is still a citizen even when they are outside the territory of Kenya. They are still a citizen even when they're incarcerated abroad. It doesn't matter, Ashley, what kind of crime they are found committing, whether it is drugs, whether it is even murder. They are still citizens of Kenya, and the State Department for Foreign Affairs is the one mandated to take care of them abroad. They haven't even done enough to demand accountability from Tanzania. And I found my colleague talking about the fact that the president irresponsibly apologized to Tanzania. I think every single member of head of state should be asking Tanzania to account for why their citizens were tortured on Tanzanian soil, number one. Number two, I think the East Africa community needs to pronounce itself quickly, because actually, I don't know if tomorrow KTN is going to send you to Tanzania. I don't know if somebody else is going to be sent to Tanzania, and we are not even sure if individuals are safe when they travel to those countries. Are we now saying we live in a region where governments are going to collaborate to punish dissent? When did it become wrong for citizens to actually ask their governments to be accountable about certain things? When there's a case as high profile, Ashley, as a treason case, linking the leader of the opposition, and in a situation where the opposition has actually been removed from participating in an election, like the situation is in Tanzania, obviously other judiciaries are going to take interest in the case. The countries in the East Africa community have been learning from each other, not just on judicial practice. They have been learning on matters of ethics and anti-corruption, and the anti-corruption bodies have been meeting just last week but one you saw we had a meeting here of the security sector from the entire region, and you saw even one of the enemies of the soils of Kenya visiting from the US to come for the same. People are constantly collaborating for different activities of governance, and the judicial activity is no exception. I don't see any grounds upon which Boni and Atuhaire were to be tortured. I don't see any grounds based on which the former CJ Emeritus, William Tunga, was deported from Tanzanian soils. I don't see any grounds against which Martha Karua was deported from those soils, and everybody else who accompanied them, even if they are branded activists. But dangerously so, Ashley, one of the things I'm most disturbed by is the fact that this is torture, and the rest of the world, apart from the US Bureau for Africa, is very quiet about this matter. Torture is illegal under any constitution, under any law. The AU itself should be completely disturbed that this kind of news is coming out of Tanzania. I don't know whether they're waiting for a botched election for them to now go there and start doing peacekeeping when something has gone wrong. I think the African Commission on People and Human Rights should be asking questions to Tanzania, because they're party to it, asking them to account as to why people have been tortured on their soils, because they are the gatekeepers, and this is the AUC chairman. They're the gatekeepers on implementation of human rights in the continent. I also believe, Ashley, that the AUC should also demand that they account as to the question of the African Convention on Democracy, Elections and Governance, because something is definitely going very wrong in Tanzania, and they're embarrassed about it, which is why they will not allow people to go in there and observe. There is no illegality in observing a judicial process in a country. I know the procedures for lawyers to practice across borders have not been finalized by the East Africa Legislative Assembly. However, there are provisions for individuals to apply for documentation and licenses to work, and they're given annually. Martha Karua had at least for 1 year. They claim that her was completed, but nothing was stopping her from going there to observe that judicial process. You saw today what is happening, which basically tells you that they don't even want anyone to observe what they're doing to Tundu Lissu. They even stop people from getting into the courts. What kind of court process is this that they're engaging in, that they do not even want people to come and witness what they're doing if it's truly truthful? Okay. And then the only Okawe speaks up, the only CCM member of parliament who has spoken authoritatively about this matter, and they decided to shut down his church because he used the church podium to address 2,141 of his branches concerning the matter. Tanzania will be free, whether it is now or in the future, because the idea of dictating, torturing people is an idea whose time has gone.
Okay.
Ashley,
yeah.
I just need to mention that we have very good and cordial relationship between Kenya and Tanzania. This must come out clearly. I don't think Kenyan brothers and sisters have an issue with Tanzanian brothers and sisters. The problem is at the leadership, executive especially, leadership level, where leaders have grouped together like cartels and decided this is where we want to go as a grouping. In fact, many of them don't care about the citizens. So when you try to interfere by such analysis, visiting the country, going to the courts, then they feel like you're sort of intimidating them and you are a threat to their plans.
Okay.
But the ordinary Tanzanian and the ordinary Kenyan are actually friendly, completely, we speak the same language.
We're brothers and sisters.
And I wanted to just give me a minute, I say this. Any act by which severe pain or suffering, whether physical or mental, is intentionally inflicted for purposes such as obtaining information, punishment, intimidation, by or with the consent of a public official, that is torture. And here, this is the Convention Against Torture, 1984. And it says that no exceptional circumstances, war, terrorism, public emergency, can justify torture. So if Boniface is asked for a phone or password and he refuses, it is still not a justification. So what we expect Tanzania to be saying right now is Kenyan citizens who are in our custody, in the police cells, we are investigating how they left the police cells and what they are claiming happened. You cannot be silent about this. In fact, we have so many tourists who come to Tanzania. They come over to Kenya and then they cross over to Tanzania. So what's going to happen? How are people, how are they looking at this? In case there's a problem, they run into a problem with the law or the police, is this the way they will be handled? So it's a big thing. Of course, we saw Agatha and Boniface narrate their ordeal, but I think Tanzania will be in a bigger ordeal in terms of economic and tourism and relationships with other countries, unless it clearly comes out and says, we did not torture, we had no intention, we have since investigated, we are now aware it is Mr. So and so who tortured Boniface Mwangi, and they are facing the law.
But it's more like our word against yours in such a scenario. Then what happens next? What about rights?
You see, Boniface was in a hotel together with Agatha, and they were picked. That hotel has a responsibility to give information, and then they were in a certain police station. That police station has a responsibility. The Tanganyika Law Society operates in Tanzania. It must give an official strong statement. There is what we call East African Law Society. It must give a very strong statement. So I don't think this is something that you can try to hide or to put under the carpet. It is not possible.
All right, Stella, coming to you, and briefly, because we want to take a short break. The PLP leader, Martha Karua, has called on the Africa Union through Africa Commission of Human Rights to establish a commission of inquiry into human rights abuses in Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. What are the chances of a fair trial? Both you and Yaribo share this sentiment that this seems to be a coordinated group against, citizens of East Africa, for lack of a better way of putting it. So then, will it be a fair trial, really, if the powers that be can interfere?
Thank you very much for that question, Ashley, and it's a critical question. First of all, the move that has been made by the Honorable Martha Karua is a valid move, and rightly so. We need to get the African Commission on People and Human Rights asking Tanzania to account for what has just happened on their soils. So that move is correct. Number two, and I want to disagree with my colleague that Kenya and Tanzania have very good relations. I think when you look under the surface, you will find that there are certain undercurrents that haven't been dealt with. And I think I've mentioned this in this studio before, Ashley. The third one has to do with the fact that the kind of trial that we're expecting may not necessarily be a courtroom process as much as it would be governments responding to the accountability mechanisms that they have committed themselves to. And that is why the Honorable Martha has gone to the apex institution, which is the SCPHR. Of course, organizations such as SADC can still write to Tanzania and demand that they account, because Tanzania is also a member of SADC, as they are a member of the East Africa community. Even in the SADC, they have committed to good governance. The government of Kenya, the government of Uganda can demand accountability and report back to the citizens of their country on the actions that are being taken concerning these individuals. The Africa peer review mechanism can actually follow up and demand accountability because there are certain tenets that Tanzania has committed itself to. So it may not necessarily be a court. Eventually, there may eventually result a courtroom process that may even end up in compensation for those two individuals, especially if they manage to catch a few people guilty. And I'm glad Bonnie and Agatha managed to name certain individuals. But then it will first start with accountability from a government perspective. Will these two governments cooperate? Ashley, I'm going to say this without batting an eyelid. They are not planning to cooperate. That is why you have noticed my voice is constantly going to people outside of them. If they are planning to cooperate, do you know who is the chairman of the Heads of State Summit right now? It is the president of Kenya. If he was keen on making sure that he gets answers concerning this matter, he would be able to update us on a daily basis, because the chairman of the Heads of State Summit is constantly able to ask the secretary to give him an update on any matter. So if he has an update, if he's keeping quiet and not informing Kenyans, it's because he has chosen not to inform Kenyans. I want that we also take note of the fact that there's shrinking political space in the entire continent. Majority of the governments are slowly becoming dictatorships. And so we must be very careful about the kind of solidarity of bad manners that we are seeing arising right now, where we have governments collaborating for this kind of thing. You had Agatha saying that it is at the point after she had been tortured that someone came and told him, we didn't realize you're this famous. So if it was a small person, they would actually get lost. And Ashley, I'm not just making this up. The Honorable Gwajuma of Kawe has actually demanded that his party and the government accounts for 83 abductions. 82 and 83 is Agatha and Bonnie. 81 are Tanzanians. 7 Tanzanians are not happy in their situation. They just don't have the space to speak as much as Kenyans have space to speak.
Okay.
And that is something that we have to also have solidarity with them and support them with eventually. But first, let's get justice for the son of the soil, irrespective of who in government dislikes him. He is not supposed to be tortured by anybody, not a Kenyan government official, not a foreign government official.
All right, hold that thought. We'll be back shortly after the break.